I spent a lot of my life dealing with social awkwardness and fear of socializing. And today I want to offer you 3 highly practical tips for making conversations easier and making them more interesting and enjoyable for everyone involved, you and the other person. So, tip number 1 is to gauge your response to the context and the amount of time you think is available in that particular conversational container. So you might think of it in terms of, very roughly, your response can be in 3 sizes: small, medium, or large. So if you are just passing each other on the street or the hallway and they say, "How are you?" that is probably time for a small response, right? So you might say, ups and downs, right? That's at least better than just saying fine. Ups and downs is probably a more realistic answer, a more true answer. Um, Medium, maybe you are, um, sitting there at the beginning of a meeting, waiting for other people to arrive. So maybe you've got a few minutes. So they say, "How's it going?" You might say, "Well, yeah, this week is off to kind of a busy start. Yeah, I feel like I have a lot on my plate, but I had a fun weekend. I got to spend some time with some friends, and it was pretty fun." All right. Then large might be, you're at a social gathering and you find yourself sitting down on a couch next to someone. Here is a wide open opportunity. So they say, "How are you?" You might say, "Well, yeah, life's been pretty tough lately. Dealing with a lot. Um, do you feel open to hearing about it?" And then if they say yes, then maybe you share. "Wow, I've been facing a lot of depression lately, a lot of anxiety. Wow, there's this happening and this happening." Right? So before you kind of dump too much, it's good to check in. Like, do you feel available for this? Do you have some space for this? Are you interested in hearing more about that? And then you can share. So the 3 sizes and the context, right? Where are you? Are you at work? Are you at home? How appropriate is it to go into various topics depending on the context? And one tip that I'll offer is that often I think it's possible to turn a smaller container into a larger one more easily than you might think. Sometimes we might feel like everyone's in a hurry. Like maybe you think this has to be a small answer right now. We're just kind of passing each other in the hallway. But sometimes you have the opportunity to enlarge that container. Instead of just saying, "Fine," you could say, "I've actually been struggling with something that I think you might know something about. Do you have a few minutes to stop and drop in about that?" Right? You can ask for more. Maybe you've been chatting with someone a bit at the beginning of a meeting and other people arrive and you have to cut your conversation short. Then you can say, "Hey, this was really interesting. Do you want to get coffee later? Could we continue this conversation tomorrow?" Right? So that's tip number 1. Kind of tailor your answer, tailor how you're speaking to the context and to the size of the container. And remember that you have more power here than you might think. It's possible for you to enlarge the container. And it's also possible for you to shrink it. Even if you're sitting there on the couch and you could give a long answer, maybe you don't feel like it. And that's okay, right? You're allowed to have a preference. Maybe you're feeling quiet right now. So they might invite a big answer, and you could say something like, I'd love to share more about that another time, but to be honest, I'm feeling a little quiet and introspective right now. Yeah, I'd prefer to be alone at the moment, but I'd love to check in later." That's allowed. All right. Tip number 2 is it's great to ask questions, right? That's a common tip we hear is be curious about the other person because people like talking about themselves. But don't go overboard. Don't just ask question after question. Then it feels like an interrogation. So the proper way to think about it is it's more like a back and forth, like you're playing tennis. You hit them the ball, they do something with it, they hit it back, right? And there is an art to it where if they're not throwing the ball back to you as often, ideally they're going to say, "What do you think about that, Michael? Tell me more about that. I'd love to know about this thing," right? That'd be great if they gave you many opportunities to share yourself as well, if they're, asking you interesting questions, but sometimes they're not going to do that. And so sometimes you have to choose, now's my time to share. I'm just going to do it, even if they didn't ask. So one way of doing that is to say, after they say something and they pause for a moment, you could say, "Oh, that reminds me of something in my life," or "That makes me think of this." So one option is to kind of build on what they said by sharing your version of it or what it makes you think of. Or you can also pivot. You could say, "Oh, cool. Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah. Something I've been thinking about a lot lately is this. What do you think about that?" Or, "I'm reading this really interesting book right now, and they make this point. What do you think?" So you're allowed to just bring up a different topic that feels interesting to you that you think they might find interesting. I'll give you one more tip here, which is sometimes people give kind of simple answers because they're not used to going to a certain depth, or they're not sure if you're kind of intending to go to a certain depth. So one way of doing that is to model the depth first, like you share vulnerability first. But here's another way. Let's say I ask, "What's your favorite color?" And you say green. And I say, "Cool, why green?" And they say, "I don't know, I just like green." So at that point, you could say, "Okay, fine," and move on. But if you want, you can also add a little interestingness to your question. Like instead of just saying, "Why green?" You could kind of make it more interesting by saying something first to add context before asking your question. So you could say something like, "Green, cool. I've been thinking a lot lately about perception and how, we might both call something green, but who knows if what you call green is the same as what I call green, right?" Isn't that weird how, we assume we're all kind of seeing the same colors around us, but it's really tied to our life experiences. Like what do I associate with green, right? So it makes me curious. What do you associate with green? Like what do you think it is that in your life that's made you like green so much? So you can see how I'm offering this person a gift. I'm offering the conversation a gift. I'm injecting interestingness. Instead of just saying, "Why do you like green?" I'm massaging that question to make it easier for them to give a depthful, interesting answer. So I'm being of service to the conversation and to that person. The third tip is, instead of seeing conversation as a competition, someone's going to win, someone's going to lose, someone's more interesting, someone's less interesting, I need to say something good, I need to ask them the right question, right? That can lead to you kind of planning what you're going to say next as they're speaking instead of really listening to them. I invite you to see it instead as it's like you're building a structure together. Imagine you each have a set of Lego bricks. One person says one thing, you put down a brick. Then they have a brick. They can put it on top of yours and build on that. They could put it next to yours and ask kind of a related question, or they could put it somewhere totally different and pivot. And then you've got your brick. Where are you going to put it? Close to theirs, close to a different place, and you're kind of brick by brick. You two are building a tower, the tower of the conversation. So it's co-created. That's what good conversation is. It's a joint effort. It's not a competition. And so it can be easy sometimes when you're trying to practice and become a better conversationalist that you hold it really seriously. I have to do this right. I have to be good. I have to be skillful. But really, social conversation is play. It's supposed to be fun, right? So I invite you to brainstorm a few topics that would be fun for you. What are some things that you would enjoy talking about? And have those in your back pocket. So next time when there's a lull in conversation, you can just bring out a random topic. If you could be any animal, what would you be? Who's your favorite character in Harry Potter? You know, if you could have a mythical creature as a pet, what would you have? Whatever random thing would be fun and interesting for you. And the goal in conversation really is trying to find the Venn diagram between what things are fun for you, what things do you find interesting, and what things are fun for them, what things do they find interesting. So this whole business of asking questions is really trying to find that sweet spot of what is the thing that we're honing in on that we both want to talk about together. It's just play. All right. So remember to gauge the context and kind of massage your topic, your answer to fit the container. And you can kind of try to enlarge it or shrink it if you want, depending on your preference. Then number 2 is don't just interrogate question after question. See it more as kind of a tennis match. And you're allowed to take the ball sometimes too if they're not sending it to you. And you can kind of massage your questions to make them deeper and inspire a deeper answer in them. And you can also offer vulnerability first to encourage that in them. And then number 3 is to see a conversation as co-created, brick by brick, and it's all just play. Hope that helps. Love to hear how it goes for you in the comments, and I hope you have a nourishing day.